Hey y'all, my name is Sarah and I love to talk about movies. And today we're going to talk about The Other Side of the Door. The Other Side of the Door is a horror movie. In this case, we have a young couple who are in Mumbai, India, Maria and Michael. So the movie starts on the day where Maria tells Michael that she's pregnant. The husband, I think, is someone who sells antiques or vintage items, handmade goods. He has a business where they kind of source those goods. It was on a trip there when Maria announces that she's pregnant and also that she doesn't want to come back to the United States. She wants to stay in India, stay there with Michael, for them to build a life there. They walk around for a bit. They're walking on the local beach. Some kids are playing in the background when a ball rolls up to them. Michael picks it up and goes to give it back when a child starts screaming and black tears start coming out of their eyes. And that's when Maria wakes up. She's just had a nightmare. She's at home in bed with her husband. She turns to her husband and sees that he is fully asleep and starts punching him and slapping him. And he wakes up all of a sudden and she starts crying and he goes to comfort her and hold her. The next morning, we get a better view of their house. It's quite large. They live on the edge of town and they also have a housekeeper who is, going around getting things ready for the day. Their daughter, Lucy, is wandering around and Maria goes to apologize to Michael. He says something like, there's no reason to apologize. And as the camera goes through the house, you can see their home. You notice that their family photos on the wall include photos of Maria, Michael, Lucy, and a little boy named Oliver. So she, mentions to him that she's having a hard time and he says, we'll get through it. He leaves for the day. She sort of collapses on herself. Piki is there and kind of sees this happening. And later on, when he comes home from work, she is there to let him know that Maria went to bed early, that she said she had a headache. He goes to check in on Lucy, then goes to see Maria, and she's unresponsive. Apparently, she'd taken a bottle of aspirin or some other kind of pain reliever. As she loses consciousness, there's a flashback. And in the flashback, she is waking up after hitting her head on the steering wheel. Her car has been pushed off of a bridge and is filling up with water. Lucy and her son Oliver are in the car. So after she manages to get herself free, she goes into the back seat. Lucy is unconscious. Oliver is struggling. His leg is trapped between the door and his seat. He can't get out. And Maria has a terrible decision to make. After rescuing Lucy, she tries to go back into the water to rescue her son. People prevented her from going back into the river. An ambulance is called, she's picked up, and they get there in time. They were able to pump her stomach. Piki is there in the hospital room and shares a personal story with Maria about her daughter and how she passed away. She also told her of a place near where she grew up where she was able to contact her daughter one last time to tell her goodbye. And that as long as Maria promises to follow her instructions exactly, she will tell her exactly what she needs to do in order to say her goodbyes and get the closure that she needs in order to move on with her life. Maria's husband was upset, but he also understood that she was going through something difficult to explain to him, and he did not seem to blame her at all. Maria goes back home, she meets with Piki, and they start the process. She is to take her son's ashes to a temple, spread his ashes on the steps, and to wait inside with the door locked. Under no circumstances is she to open the door. Her son will come to her and will speak to her through the door. She is to say her goodbyes, but not to open it. It is a long journey to the temple, and she has a lot of time to think. She takes her time, travels out to the temple, does as instructed, and waits. Soon enough, she falls asleep. Whispering and soft sounds wake her up. She becomes frightened and gets ready to leave when she hears her son's voice through the door. She's overjoyed to hear from him again. She apologizes for not being able to rescue him as well. He tells her that it wasn't her fault. He becomes a bit upset and sounds scared and tells her that he has to leave, that he has to go, and she says she just wants to see him one more time, and she opens the door. There's no one there. She walks out. There's an eerie kind of silence. She turns to look at the temple. There's nothing inside. She turns around, and there are these figures standing all around the temple, seeing her, seeing what she's done. Scared, she travels back to the village, and in the morning heads back to the city. By the time she's arrived, she's in much better spirits. When she speaks to her husband, she makes it clear that she lost her way, but that she has recovered and that she's really gonna work hard to be there for him and their daughter. The day before she arrived, a wind blew through their house and their dog was on edge, randomly barking and whining, and the plants began to shed their leaves. For the first few days, everything was fine. Maria appeared to be fully committed to reconnecting with her husband and her daughter, and each day more plants would die. That's when Maria becomes aware of a presence in the house. Somehow Oliver has managed to follow her back and is able to communicate with her. In her joy, she overlooks a few things happening around the house, including the death of her entire garden, birds, fish in their pond, and the behavior of their dog. Lucy is also aware of the presence as it is communicating with her as well. And one night during a storm, things turn darker and become violent, and whatever it was bit Lucy. That's when Piki finds out that Maria opened the door and allowed the spirit in. She confronts Maria and lets her know exactly what she has done and what she has to do to fix it. Maria refuses. And one day, while the whole family is out, Piki decides to take matters into her own hands and burn everything that may connect Oliver with the material world. His toys, photographs, everything. She starts to have more visions of the dead, and one vision of her daughter draws her out to the pond. The family gets home. They find that a fire has been started in the yard. Piles of Oliver's belongings are in bags, and Piki is nowhere to be found. Maria is the one who finds her in the pond, drowned. Visions are also spreading to the father. He's seeing scary visions of ghosts. Maria decides to do what is necessary and burn all of his things, but it's too late. It turns out that Lucy has become possessed by Oliver's spirit and is convinced their father, Michael, that their mother is trying to hurt her. Michael tries to separate Maria and Lucy attacks Michael and Winston. The Agori, I think is how you pronounce it, attempt an exorcism as the goddess of the dead is nearly reincarnated and brought into the material world. Maria offers up herself and becomes possessed by her son, who is then killed to break the connection. She slowly loses consciousness and then suddenly wakes up. She's on the steps of the temple, lying in her own ashes, hearing the voice of her husband calling to her. She answers him, slowly realizing where she is and what he must have done. He tells her how much he misses her. She calls out to him. She tells him not to open the door. There's a sound of a lock turning. The camera moves from her face as she starts walking up the steps of the temple towards the doors. You hear something like pushing from the other side, the handle rattling, And as we get closer and closer, she says, no, no, don't open the door until we are right in front of the doors, going into the space in between, and it all fades to black. And that's how the movie ends. So there's actually, I have a thing about Americans going to other countries and deciding that we fell in love with a place and we're gonna stay here. Because a lot of times the logistics of that happening are not really worked out. In this case, the story is set up well so that he already has a job that requires him to be there. His job is to source these different goods. Makes sense. Why he's there, why they need an actual physical person to be there for these items, makes sense. He handles things, he picks up stuff, he has a desk in an office where he works, and it's full of stuff. There's an order to things, and he appears to be quite successful at it. Their house is freaking huge, but it's not out of sync with the rest of the city and where they are. Sometimes it's very weird to see certain styles in a place where it just doesn't belong. And in this case, it very much belonged. The decorations that they had, the colors of the house, the way that things were laid out in the house, like furniture, toys. So that already made me like the story a lot more, because they did not dress like Americans while they were in India. They dress like the humidity is at 100% and it's over 100 degrees, which I appreciate, because sometimes, you walking around in your crisp button-ups, you know what I mean? There were things that the characters did and their lives that emphasized over and over again, these are real people, these are authentic people. In the opening scene, after Maria wakes up from that nightmare and she mollywops her husband for being able to sleep through the night, that whole scene felt super relatable, especially considering everything that you learn about the circumstances of their son's death later. And the fact that he did not fight her about it and he was not genuinely upset about it. He understood. It really shows like the depth of their relationship. And there are moments like that throughout the entire movie that really show the depth of their relationship. Like, clearly, Maria is not okay, but also he does not know what he can do about that too. So another thing I like, the chemistry with Maria, Michael, and Lucy as a family, very good chemistry. Lucy looking like a wild child, absolutely. It just makes sense for their lives right at this moment in time. They probably pulled her out of school, makes sense. They have a housekeeper at home to help keep things running smoothly, to give Maria some support during this time. Makes sense. What bothered me a little bit was them not having connections. Like, Michael's family, Maria's family didn't seem to be very much in the picture. They didn't have like a system set up for communication between the families, like WhatsApp or FaceTime or whatever. And they didn't appear to have other friends, like other neighbors, other American couples that were either permanently or temporarily in India, for them to start friendships with and have that support or that understanding of like being in a similar situation. There was a little bit of a gap there, but that could also be explained by the tragedy, that level of loss. They may have pushed everyone else away that was in their life. There are like just a bunch of different things that they did as parents that I really like, that emphasize, I am a parent, I think about my child, even in situations that don't necessarily warrant it. Like, Michael came home late from work the day that Maria, and the first thing he did was go to check in on Lucy. Now, Lucy was already asleep in bed, and Piki told him that. She also told him that Maria had gone to bed early because she had a headache. He did not have to check on his child. He gotten the okay from the housekeeper, but he did anyway. It's things like that that really make them so convincing as parents to me. And then later, finding out that he is also still grieving, it's just very different. It's triggered by very different things. The home videos, that was deep, y'all. I was like, dag. And then there were things where I was like, okay, all right, come on now. Koi fish in the pond, reading the Jungle Book. Their house is like a fairy tale almost, and the perfect family lived there. And then with the loss of this child, it's like the fairy tale turned very dark. I appreciated that the husband, I'm assuming, spoke Hindi. I know that they speak like 20 languages in India. It's a huge country, but I do appreciate that there are a couple scenes where he's speaking Hindi. The Agora freaked me out, man. They did. It just, Piki explaining who they were and what they believed was spooky. And then them continuing to show up was also spooky, and was one of those things where I was like, But it makes sense if, people are always looking past them or trying to ignore them. They can sneak up on you. Oh, also, were Piki's wrinkles real? Because I don't think they were real. Also, one of the reasons I think why I noticed them is because she's often lit here, almost like a film noir style, right across here, and they have these like wrinkles, deep wrinkles, and I'm like, I don't think those wrinkles are real because everything else is so smooth. It's a little thing, and I know it doesn't matter, but I was like, I don't think they are. That twist, Oliver possessing Lucy, especially with what Piki said about what's happening to his spirit, was so sad and like dark. And especially the way that he managed to turn the tables on her was way more manipulative than the child that she knew. And I think that's what made it extra tragic in a way. And also Winston got it because the dogs always do. It's not fair that so many dogs are like, hey, something's up, something ain't right. And that like twisted figure, like crawling figure, is very familiar. It's one that we see in horror movies a lot. So that was something that I was familiar with. I did like how the visions seemed to spread along with, the plants dying, the birds dying, the fish dying, seeing and then not seeing visions of her boy or what was her boy, and then not her boy at all, but this other figure, and how the danger is coming from multiple sources, not being able to trust your own senses. I thought that was really great, and it kept a lot of the tension throughout the film because you could not be sure of what you were seeing, and time is running out, and there was a lot more loss in the film than I was expecting. And they have a lot of really great, like as far as the cinematography, there are a lot of really great shots, like sweeping across the city, up the stairs of the temple, traveling across the country. Really great sequences in that way. I love like the sweeping shots through the house. It really emphasizes how big the house was, how at one time it was like full of color and sound and birds chirping and a dog and all of these beautiful sounds of life at one point. And now that it isn't, it makes it seem echoey and almost like empty. I really like how they made that contrast without overdoing it. I really enjoyed the film. I would give it a solid 3 out of 5. I would recommend it. There's some violence, but it's not really gory violence. But you guys let me know what you think. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all next time.